I always thought I'd be ready for that call, the one that splits your life into a before and after. When my sister Carly called sobbing about Dad's heart attack, I dropped everything. My hands shook so badly I could barely grab my keys. My heart raced the whole drive, every worst-case scenario playing out in my mind. I barely registered parking, racing up the hospital steps, praying under my breath. But when I reached the room Carly had sobbed about, there was nothing. No Dad, no medical equipment, no doctors, just an empty bed. Confused, I called her. She picked up laughing, and said, "Relax, Lila. He's fine. We just needed you to come back home. You've been away too long." The bottom fell out of my stomach. I leaned against the wall, cold, stunned. The betrayal hit deeper than anything I'd ever known. They lied. They used death, Dad's death, just to yank me back under their control. That kind of manipulation doesn't leave a wound you can just bandage. It hollows you out. I walked out of the hospital, if you could even call it that, and just sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how my own blood could weaponize my love like that. It wasn't just hurt I felt. It was humiliation, rage, and a profound, aching sadness. I thought about all the times I defended them to my friends, all the times I said, "Family's complicated, but they love me." How stupid I felt now. That day, something inside me cracked open. I wasn't the Lila they remembered anymore, and I was done being the one who hurt alone. Growing up in my family was like walking a tightrope over a pit you couldn't see but always knew was there. One wrong move, one misstep, and you'd fall. Not into anger exactly, but into something worse. Coldness, distance, that silent, suffocating disappointment they wielded like a weapon. My mother, Marianne, wasn't the screaming type. She was sharper, subtler. Her words could slice thinner than any knife, always under the guise of advice or constructive criticism. "Lila, you're so sensitive." "Lila, you always overreact." "Lila, don't you want to make something of yourself?" It wore me down over the years, like water carving stone. I didn't realize how much of myself I chipped away just trying to survive them. And Dad, well, Dad was a shadow of a man in his own home. I saw glimpses of someone kind, someone warm, in the rare moments we shared alone, fixing a leaky faucet together, watching old westerns in the living room when everyone else was out. But mostly, he followed Mom's lead. Quiet, compliant, fading into the background when things got hard. Carly, my younger sister, took after Mum. All sugar on the outside, but manipulative to the core. She learned early that playing the victim got her what she wanted. I can't even count the times I took the blame for things she did, just because it was easier than fighting her lies. When I moved out at 22, it felt like breathing clean air for the first time. No daily criticisms, no guilt trips about how selfish I was for wanting my own life. I found a small apartment on the other side of the city and worked whatever jobs I could to pay rent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped mug in the cupboard, it was mine. And for the first time, I started to figure out who I was when no one was watching, when no one was pulling the strings. But my family didn't see it that way. To them, I had abandoned them. Whenever we spoke, it was a litany of passive-aggressive jabs. "We're struggling so much here, but you're too busy living your fancy life," Mum would say, the bitterness barely masked. Or Carly's favourite. "Some of us don't have the luxury of running away." Running away. That's how they saw it. Not as survival, not as growth, but as betrayal. And yet, despite everything, a part of me still ached for their approval. Some nights, lying awake in my tiny apartment, I'd wonder if I was selfish, if I had been too hard on them. Maybe families just hurt each other sometimes. Maybe love was supposed to look like that. That's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't just control your actions. It gets inside your head, rewrites your memories, makes you question your reality until you can't tell where your guilt ends and their cruelty begins. After the fake heart attack stunt, though, something inside me snapped awake. I started looking closer at the things I used to excuse, like how they only called when they needed something. Money, help with errands, favours. I was never, "Lila, how are you?" I was a resource to be tapped, a tool to be guilted into compliance. Or how every decision I made for myself, the jobs I took, the friends I chose, even the apartment I picked, was met with thinly veiled disapproval, as if my happiness outside of their orbit was an act of aggression. The realization was a cold, bitter pill. They didn't want me happy. They wanted me useful, subservient, dependent. And now, as I sat in my car outside that sham of a hospital staring at the empty street, I understood the truth with a clarity that hurt worse than any of their insults. They never truly saw me. Not as Lila. Not as a person with dreams and needs and fears. Just as a pawn, a means to an end. The family I had spent my whole life trying to earn love from had never offered unconditional love in the first place. Their love was a transaction, and I had finally defaulted. I wiped at my eyes angrily, frustrated at the tears. They didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve me. And yet, the part of me that had once yearned for their acceptance still twisted painfully in my chest. Could you ever really stop loving the people who broke you? Maybe not. But you could choose who had the power to break you again. I pulled out my phone and stared at Carly's latest text. Some half-hearted apology mixed with another request for help. For once, I didn't reply. For once, I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and final. It was time to stop playing the role they wrote for me. It was time to choose me. The first few days after the hospital incident were a blur. I kept replaying it in my head, each time feeling a new wave of anger, sadness, and something sharper. Resolve. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't answer their texts. I sat in my tiny kitchen staring out at the rusted fire escape, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt curiosity. What was so urgent that they had to fake a heart attack to get me back? I started digging, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Something deep inside me, some animal instinct that had been muffled for years, had finally roared to life. Protect yourself. The first clue came from an overheard conversation. I was visiting a coffee shop near my old neighbourhood, needing a taste of familiarity, when I spotted two women who used to be close friends with my mother. I hadn't seen them in years, but their voices carried across the small space easily. "It's a shame what happened with Marianne and the money," one of them said, clacking her tongue. "I know," the other replied. "All that inheritance gone, and now they're practically begging people for help." My heart skipped a beat. Inheritance? I leaned back in my seat, ears burning. I hadn't heard anything about inheritance before. As far as I knew, we were just your typical middle-class family, scraping by like everyone else. But now, things weren't adding up. That night, when I got home, I tore through old emails, family documents, anything I could find. I remembered a few years ago my grandfather had passed away. We were never close. He lived states away, and my parents always spoke of him with disdain. But he was wealthy. Oil money, land, something like that. I had been too young and too caught up in my own life to pay much attention at the time. But now, connecting the dots, It hit me like a punch to the gut. They had inherited a fortune, and somehow it had vanished. The pieces clicked into place one after another. The desperate phone calls, the guilt trips, the fake emergencies. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they needed me. The realization should have crushed me. And for a moment, it almost did. How could people who claimed to love me be so calculating, so manipulative? Was I just a safety net to them? A backup plan? But under the hurt, something else bloomed. A fierce, burning determination. They thought they could pull me back into their orbit. They thought they could control me like they always had, through shame, through obligation, through carefully crafted lies. They were wrong. I wasn't the naive, desperate girl who would bend over backward for scraps of their approval anymore. I was someone new now, someone stronger, someone who could see through the performance to the hollow truth underneath. I realized something else too, something that made my stomach churn with anger. If they had managed to lose everything Grandpa left behind, it meant they were reckless. It meant they were dangerous, not just to themselves, but to me. If I got tangled up in their lives again, it wouldn't just be emotional damage anymore. It would be financial, legal, life-ruining. I couldn't let that happen. So I made a decision. I would play along, for now. Pretend to forgive, pretend to fold back into the family. Let them think they had reeled me back in. And while they were busy celebrating their victory, I would be preparing my escape. Quietly, carefully, without a trace. I started saving every penny I could. I found a second job working evenings at a small bookstore. I read everything I could about financial independence, legal protections, inheritance rights. I wasn't going to get trapped. I wasn't going to let their bad decisions become my downfall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I was making my own plans. It was a strange, empowering feeling, like standing on solid ground after years of sinking sand. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my resolve to try, but now it had a companion, courage. Courage to build a life that was mine alone. Courage to protect what little I had clawed together with my own 2 hands. Courage to walk away, not in anger, not in spite, but in freedom. I sat in my apartment late one night, notebook open, pen scratching across the page. Goals, deadlines, plans. It felt almost surgical, cold and methodical. But there was love in it too. Love for the woman I was becoming. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my dreams for them, the art classes I dropped, the jobs I turned down, the friends I ghosted because Mom didn't approve. No more. I was done living a life built out of fear and obligation. I was done being their insurance policy, their scapegoat, their last resort. This time, I would choose myself. No matter what it cost. In the weeks that followed, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the dutiful daughter again, answering texts, showing up to family dinners, nodding along to their endless stories about how hard things had been, how no one else had come through for them. But you're different, Lila, Mom would say, grasping my hand tightly across the dinner table, her nails digging into my skin. You've always been the good one. The words twisted in my chest like a blade. Good, obedient, useful, that's all they saw when they looked at me. Beneath the fake smiles and small talk, my mind was a storm. Every conversation, every subtle request for help, every pointed comment about how much easier things would be if I just moved back home. It all added to the pressure building inside me. I couldn't tell if the exhaustion I felt was from pretending or from fighting myself every single second. Because despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, a part of me still loved them. a stupid, stubborn part of me wanted to believe they could change, that this time would be different, that maybe if I just gave a little more, sacrificed a little more, I could fix what was broken between us. Some nights, lying awake in my small bed, I would think about the good memories. They were few, but they existed. Sunday afternoons when Dad taught me to ride a bike, the way Mum used to braid my hair for school, humming softly under her breath. Carly sneaking into my room at night when she had bad dreams, curling up next to me like a scared little bird. I clung to those memories like lifelines, trying to convince myself that the people they were then were still inside the people they had become. But reality always crashed back down. The next morning, it would be Mom forgetting to tell me about a family meeting and blaming me for not showing up. It would be Carly crying about her bills, her car repairs, her endless string of crises, and expecting me to step in and fix it all. It would be Dad, silent and distant, letting it happen just like he always did. The weight of it all pulled me in two directions. Family loyalty on one side, self-preservation on the other, and the guilt. God, the guilt was a living, breathing thing. It whispered in my ear every time I thought about pulling away for good. You're heartless. You're selfish. You owe them everything. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was being cruel. Maybe I was abandoning them when they needed me most. Was I any better than they were if I just walked away? But then I would remember the lies, the fake heart attack, the missing inheritance, the way they only reached for me when their hands were empty and desperate. And I knew this wasn't family. Not really. Family doesn't demand your soul as payment. Family doesn't weaponize your love against you. Family doesn't only show up when they need something to take. Still, knowing the truth didn't make the choice any easier. The night before, I was supposed to sign the lease on a new apartment. Far enough from them that they couldn't just drop by. I sat at my tiny kitchen table staring at the papers. My hand hovered over the pen, heart pounding. Was I really about to do this? Was I really about to choose myself over them? I thought about all the ways they might react. The fury, the accusations, the endless guilt trips. I thought about sitting alone at Christmas, about being the villain in every story they told about me from now on. I thought about losing them forever. A tear slid down my cheek, followed by another and another. My chest ached with the weight of it. But then, a quieter thought cut through the noise. What about what you lose if you stay? My dreams, my peace, my freedom, myself. Slowly, with shaking fingers, I picked up the pen and signed my name. It wasn't a grand moment. There were no fireworks, no swelling music, just a quiet, painful breath of relief. I had chosen. I wasn't choosing anger. I wasn't choosing revenge. I was choosing survival. I was choosing to be the author of my own life, not a footnote in theirs. The next morning, I packed the few things I cared about into boxes. Books, art supplies, old photos that reminded me of who I used to be, before they chipped away at me piece by piece. I left the rest behind. And when I drove away from the apartment, from the neighbourhood where I'd spent so much of my life trying and failing to be good enough, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward something. Toward freedom, toward peace, toward myself. I didn't know freedom would feel so terrifying at first. I thought when I left, I would be soaring, light as air, unburdened, invincible. But the truth was, those first few days alone in my new apartment, the silence was deafening. It wrapped around me like a thick fog, reminding me just how much space my family used to fill. even if most of it was with noise I never wanted to hear. There were moments when the old instincts flared up. The phone would buzz, and I'd reach for it without thinking. The guilt would creep in, whispering ugly things. They need you. You're being cruel. You'll regret this. But each time I pressed through it, each time I reminded myself why I had chosen this path. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving me. I started building a life from scratch, piece by fragile piece. I put energy into my jobs, not just to earn a paycheck, but to prove to myself that I could. I wasn't the useless daughter they once told me I was. I was capable, smart, worth something, even if they had never seen it. I decorated my small apartment with hand-me-down furniture and thrift store finds. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every chipped plate, every worn armchair felt like a small rebellion, proof that I could make something beautiful out of nothing. And I started doing things they would have sneered at. Tiny acts of defiance that felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. I took a painting class on weekends. I made friends who laughed without judgment, who asked about my day and actually listened. I started going for long walks without explaining myself to anyone. I spent whole afternoons reading novels just because I wanted to. Freedom wasn't loud or dramatic like I had imagined it would be. It was quiet. Software. It came in moments. Drinking coffee on the balcony, feeling the sun on my face without a schedule looming over me, falling asleep without the constant knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, waking up to a day that was mine alone to shape. Of course, the fear didn't vanish overnight. It still reared its head sometimes, especially when I thought about the long term. What if they found me? What if they showed up demanding more? What if I wasn't strong enough to say no when it really counted? But underneath the fear was something stronger, a growing belief in myself, a voice, small but steady, that whispered, "You don't have to go back." One night, sitting by the window with my journal open, I wrote something that changed everything for me. You are not responsible for fixing people who broke you. I stared at the words for a long time, the truth of them sinking deeper than anything else had. I had spent so long believing that love meant sacrifice, that if I loved my family, I had to endure whatever they threw at me, manipulation, cruelty, abandonment, and still come back for more. But real love didn't demand self-erasure. Real love didn't threaten, didn't guilt, didn't destroy. And if they couldn't offer that kind of love, it wasn't my job to keep bleeding for them. Maybe it made me a bad daughter in their eyes. Maybe it made me selfish, heartless, cold. But maybe, just maybe, it made me free. In the weeks that followed, I strengthened my boundaries. When Mum texted asking for money, I didn't respond. When Carly tried to guilt trip me about abandoning family, I muted her number. When Dad called once, a rare thing, I let it go to voicemail, and I didn't listen. Each act of defiance was a stitch, sewing myself back together. And the strangest thing was, the more I chose myself, the more the guilt loosened its grip. It still knocked sometimes, like an unwelcome guest at the door, but I didn't let it in. I was building a new foundation now, not on their expectations or their needs, but on my own worth. For the first time, I could see a future that belonged only to me. A future where my choices weren't dictated by fear or obligation. A future where love, when it came, would be real, not transactional. It wasn't perfect. There were still lonely nights. There were still moments when the old wounds ached like phantom limbs. But I was healing. Slowly, stubbornly, gloriously, I was healing. And deep in my bones, I knew I would never let them take that from me again. The thing about healing that no one tells you is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a dramatic sunrise or a sudden snap where everything feels right again. It's slower, quieter. Sometimes you don't even realize you've changed until you're standing in a moment that would have broken you before, and you're still standing. That's what it felt like the day I saw them again. I wasn't expecting it. I had built my life far enough away that running into them felt impossible. But fate, or maybe just bad luck, had other plans. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was walking through the lobby of the building where I had just started working, a job I had fought tooth and nail to earn, when I heard a voice I knew like a scar. "Lila?" I turned slowly. There they were, my mother, my sister Carly, and even my father, trailing behind them with that same tired, defeated look he always wore. They were standing in front of the reception desk, paperwork in hand, confusion written all over their faces. They didn't recognize me at first. I was different now, stronger, standing straighter, wearing clothes that fit me like armor instead of hand-me-down guilt. When realization finally dawned in their eyes, I saw it. The flicker of shock, of discomfort, of something close to fear. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air between us was thick with everything we had left unsaid. "What are you doing here?" Carly finally asked, voice sharp, suspicious. I smiled, a real calm smile, and tucked my badge back into my pocket. "I work here," I said simply, "but this is my building now." The truth of it hit them harder than any argument could have. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to explain or defend or beg to be understood. I had outgrown the version of myself that had once needed their approval like air. There was a long pause. I could see the wheels turning in my mother's mind, scrambling for a way to twist this, to bring me back under their thumb. "We should catch up sometime," she said, voice coated in fake sweetness. "We've missed you." Maybe once I would have melted at those words. Maybe once I would have run back into their open arms, desperate for even scraps of affection. But not anymore. "I'm really busy these days," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I hope you'll understand." It was polite, professional, final. Their faces tightened, shock melting into anger, into sadness, into something else I didn't have the energy to name. I gave a small nod, a final goodbye without ever saying the words, and turned away. I didn't look back, not this time. Later that night, sitting on my little balcony with a cup of tea in my hands, I thought about what had happened. A part of me grieved, in a small, quiet way. Grieved the family I had wished for, but never really had. Grieved the version of myself who had once believed that if she just tried harder, she could fix it all. But mostly, I felt peace. Leaving them behind hadn't made me heartless. It had made me whole. They had chosen who they were. Now I had chosen who I wanted to be. Someone who didn't live in fear. Someone who didn't mistake manipulation for love. Someone who could stand in the face of everything she used to crave. And choose herself instead. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of the future. I was excited for it. There was still so much I didn't know. Where my career would go, who I would meet, what adventures were waiting for me out there. But for once, the unknown didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an invitation to build a life that was mine in every messy, beautiful, imperfect way. I finished my tea, feeling the cool night air settle around me. Somewhere out there, they were probably telling stories about me, twisting the truth to make themselves the victims. That used to terrify me, the idea that someone could paint me as the villain in their narrative. Now, I understood something they never would. Other people's stories about you don't have to define you. You get to choose your own ending. And mine was just beginning.